Helena Jevons, welcome to the inaugural recording of the podcast of the Menopause Monologues, podcast called Hot Flashes Menopause Monologues, Season 1.
Thank you. It's a mouthful. It's delightful to be here, Helen. Thank you for having me.
You'd think one of us at least was an expert at this, but Helena's good at talking, so it's fine. Right, we should find out a bit about you. So, some background. What did you start off doing? What do you like doing? How the hell did we end up here?
Well, that is a very good question because I definitely wouldn't consider myself a writer or a playwright or an author. And I'm kind of, I suppose, having to think, well, maybe I am now. But I've always written. I've always loved the written word. I've always loved storytelling. And I guess really, you know, I'm really a marketer and a business development person. And I've always understood the power of words to win people's hearts and minds and to effectively use those very psychologically orientated ways of creating messages for people to create behaviour change with generally a commercial objective. So it's been a ridiculously difficult journey, actually, to get from being paid to write copy in a certain tone of brand voice and with a certain type of word that you use for something, and, you know, with an eye on what's going to convert somebody to buy something or consider buying something in terms of a sales funnel and all that business stuff that I do day in, day out, to giving myself the permission really to just write things that the best way I can describe it is that just needed to come out of me. And it has felt very self-indulgent. It has felt very impostery. It has felt, who am I to start writing on menopause? And then, you know, I can do the bit of like, well, who are you not to? But it's like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? You know, it hasn't been obvious, but I've just felt almost compelled, I would say, to follow this. Well, you're awake at 4 a.m. because you're menopausal. You may as well get up and do something. And so I think that's how I started writing very early in the morning at 4 a.m. before my kids were up, and because I was awake. And also because it happened in the middle of a pandemic. So I wasn't having the life I was having that I would have been if it hadn't been in that circumstance. So I guess it was there was a longing to find my own voice through writing. I had a lot of time on my own that wouldn't have had in any other circumstance than the pandemic. And I just started needing to write things out as I became menopausal and needed somewhere to put them. And as I started to have conversations with people about their experiences of menopause and to understand more about it.
In the beginning. In the beginning, God created menopause. And on each day of that fateful week, he unleashed upon womankind a new symptom. And lo, it was not good.
I can't honestly put my hand up and say I ever had a massive desire to write a play, but these monologues just started coming to me. And I suppose I did, actually, because when probably 14 years ago now, I went to Canada for 3 weeks to do a training with an amazing man called Edwin Coppard, who is one of Tony Robbins' voice trainers. And I was really lucky. He invited me over for 3 weeks to learn his process. It involved lots of songwriting, lots of writing of lyrics from different archetypes, lots of creating tunes to go with the words. And by about day 4 of that training, which was very passionate, it was very write something quickly and perform it, so your inner critic didn't have the time to kick in, I just wrote this song that was so ragey about, and this was pre-menopause, so I can't blame it on that was so ragey about, I'm basically a word whore. Like, my words are for sale, basically. I get paid by people to write what they want me to write. And that feeling and that image definitely stayed with me, of this, some kind of a desire of, well, what is it that I want to say in the world? What is it that I want to, the impact that I want to have in the world? So this did feel like, what on earth is happening here? Now these things are coming to me to write down. And yes, it was cathartic of my own personal experience of being frustrated by doctors, of being shocked at the age of, 46, 47 that I was suddenly menopausal, because I just wasn't expecting it. I was in my deluded headspace I'm 28, I'm fine, I'm like, and just almost overnight, I was, waking up with panic attacks. And there was just this whole world out there that at the time, 4 or 5 years ago, and I think that's already changed, wasn't being discussed, wasn't in the world, really. And, I had absolutely no idea. And I've got awareness from my past because, I know I had extreme anxiety and some other mental health issues from when I had 2 miscarriages. I know I had postnatal depression. So I was kind of aware that hormones could affect how you were feeling about the world. But it just hadn't occurred to me that I could be perimenopausal at the age of 46, or even probably that I was getting to, I just had passed me by completely. But it has become really obvious as I've got over the nervousness of sharing it and going, oh my God, what if this is just really terrible? And what if people think I'm an idiot and all that stuff when you do anything new? To, one of the actresses we were talking with yesterday, just saying, thank you for writing this.
I used to think I had it all figured out. My thoughts, my beliefs, the way I saw the world. But menopause has been like a sneaky little reboot for the mind, as if it's deciding to throw out the old software and install something brand new. And let me tell you, it's been revelatory in ways I never expected.
So when you were lying awake at 4 o'clock in the morning and looking for something to do and decided to start writing, had you already got Menopause Monologue in your head specifically, or did you just sort of sit down and think, oh, I'll write that thing about menopause? And which was the first one you wrote?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think what happened was I started writing almost like a journal of what I was experiencing and feeling and how annoyed I was about the fact that not only were we in a global pandemic, but now I was having to deal with it was just kind of like the final straw. I'm like, just write this down, just get it out of you, So I started to write it almost like morning pages if you've done the artist's way, or journaling, morning journaling. The first ones that I wrote about were to do with the frustration of how hard it was to get my doctor to take me seriously that it might be menopause. And I was just like, this isn't okay that I have to fight this hard to get heard. How would that be for other people? And I think then that was the jumping off point for like the different characters who you see. And I've always quite liked doing accents. I've always quite liked and again, I think that's a big part of marketing. And it's always about, well, put yourself in the customer's shoes. What's important to them? What are they looking for? What are their pain points? What needs do they have? How can you create a product or a service to address that need? So I think I've always been quite good at stepping into the shoes of the customer. And in this case, I almost felt like I was physically stepping into the body of somebody else when I was writing. So the first ones were me. And then I was like, oh, let's write one from this perspective. But as you know, from having read them and having known me through the time that I've written them, there's a lot of stories in there that are my stories that we've talked about over glasses of wine whilst singing karaoke or whatever we've been doing. And you're like, oh, there's the one with the gin bottle. There's the one with the car mantelpiece. There's the one, So there's a lot of me in there. But I also had a lot of lovely conversations with women who were all going, oh my God, what is happening to me? Like, I can't deal with this on top of a pandemic. I can't deal with this on top of homeschooling. I can't deal with this on top of trying to still work and cling on to any sense of normalcy at this time. So my personal journey started with just trying to get it confirmed that I was perimenopausal so I could get some estrogen and progesterone. And stop waking up in the night, hopefully, and feel a bit more positive about the world and not like the world was about to end tomorrow. And then my second fight was about getting Testogel. So these tiny sachets of gel where you have to put a small amount on if you have got very low levels of testosterone. So that was a second fight. And so that has ended up being one of the monologues called 7 Equal Dabs. But actually, so it wasn't, the original writing on that wasn't anything to do about the testosterone gel. It was to do with the initial frustration about getting taken seriously, about how I was feeling with what I was juggling.
Finally, they prescribed me testosterone. Oh, but not just any testosterone. Oh, no. Testosterone for men. packaged in these tiny little sachets. Each one meant to last a man 1 day. And I'm told, just split it into 7 equal dabs. Split it into 7 equal dabs. Are you kidding me? Have you seen the size of these things? I mean, they're smaller than a sugar stick. I've got to be like some deranged chef divvying up testosterone like I'm making a tasting menu. Oh, a dab for Monday, a smear for Tuesday, a swipe for Wednesday. By Thursday, I'm scraping the corners like it's the last bit of Nutella in the jar.
So obviously it was my fault that this is becoming a podcast because you initially got in touch with me and said, how do I stage these? I'm doing a book. I want to get people to read these out loud. And I went, reading out loud is my speciality. I think these should be a podcast.
Yeah.
So this has now escalated into a number of things. The podcast sort of stands on its own as a sort of collection of some of the monologues at this point. We'll see where we end up with how many of them. But at the moment, we're going for sort of 18 in total across 6 episodes. The book is the leading thing of that. So the podcast has come from the book, and now we're also talking about an event. So overall, has this all happened so quickly you're not really sure, or have you got quite solid expectations and hopes for what this will become?
It has all happened so quickly that I'm a little bit feet off the ground with the speed at which it's happened and the amount of people who've wanted to get involved around it. And I'm blown away by that at the moment. I haven't quite got my head around everything that actually needs doing. But yeah, we've got a launch event coming up at Ironworks in Brighton. Whatever happens with all the bits of it, the initial thing when I started thinking this wasn't just something I was writing in my office at 4 a.m. and maybe I should share it with some people and let's see what they say. And I realised it was something. Is that I hope that it encourages more open conversation about menopause. I have really open conversations with now everybody in my life about menopause. So I suppose what I hope it does is it gives people permission to have more open conversations about menopause and more conversations about how we could orchestrate the world to be more sympathetic and accommodating of women when they're menopausal, but also women at any stage of their life because of their hormonal fluctuations. It's been very interesting talking to men around the project, and I'm really hoping that maybe men who, I don't know, there's been lots of perspectives on it from men, and I'd like to talk to more men about it. I'm hoping that, I'd love it if the audience was half men at the launch. I'm not sure if it will be, but I'd love that, because I think men are still the people who are in lots of the decision-making positions about how organisations work. It's such a big thing. I think it must be really difficult to understand if you're not experiencing it. So I think I'm hoping that by addressing this through a lot of truth, but a lot of humour and a lot of creativity through the monologues, it will just make people think a bit, to be honest, and just make them think, this can be
And
quite
awareness.
a big deal. It is. And again, I keep going back to, we used to have, as societies, rites of passage, and there used to be ritual almost around this kind of time in life. And that it's just like, just carry on. And that's a lot of the stuff that's in the writing, is the expectation of women of themselves and of society of women that they will just get on with it.
Yeah, I've had anxiety. I had the horrendous bleeding, the heart palpitations. And
Just
I was
that.
strong woman.
Carry on.
Strong woman. And I was I think it was interesting because, like you can, and everyone does, you steel yourself for that trip to the GP where you have to make your case to the judge effectively. And you go to the doctor I saw. I never see the same one twice, but I think she was French. Very neat, very well dressed in that classic sort of French stereotypical way. And I just sort of said, I've had this, and this, and I think I need estrogen. And she did blood pressure and just went, yes, fine. Yes, here you go. Here's your prescription. I was like,
so you
thank God.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because you went to the doctors in that state of, I know I need this, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get it. Like that's not a great.
Well, I went to the point when there were the shortages of the estrogen gel, and that was sort of the first step. And then it was, I already had the coil by then to stop heavy periods, and that was something I'd braced myself for.
Brace.
Again, this is a whole other issue about anaesthetic during insertion and removal of coils.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a whole different thing, slightly related to menopause, because obviously it's useful when you're menopausal, which is why I've got it, all of that. So the estrogen was the next step. Take the gel, take it as much as it makes you feel better. In that case, if it works, it was the right thing to do. So, and that's kind of what's happened. And
It's very pragmatic.
her or me?
Her. Well, and
Yeah.
you are pragmatic. But her as well. Yeah, I think the education's changing as well, though. I mean, I think the Davina effect has been quite
very much so,
significant, and then there's lots of...
You need a middle-aged gobshite, and Davina is very much that in a good way.
Davina,
In a
you
good
are our
way.
middle-aged gobshite. But I think the amount of ways it can affect you in different things you do in your life and stuff is also what I was trying to explore. I sort of do still go backwards and forwards on myself and think, well, should I have written some of this more literally and not taken creative liberty or not tried to make it funnier? But I think to get it out there to start the conversation, I think this is a good mixture of ways of approaching it. And what I would love to do for volume 3, because volume 2 is almost fully written now, I really just hope I'm going to stop getting these ideas at some point, because I'd quite like to do something else now. But volume 3, I'd really like to be women's writings, and I'd really like this to turn into a collection of women's stories about their actual menopausal journeys. And I'd love there to be some writers' labs where they can come and gain both the confidence to do the writing and also step on stage and read their own monologue.
All of them have some basis in your experience or another person's, which I think is
very close to me.
Yeah, which I think is really important, because no one woman should really be writing about all her own experiences all the time. But the fact that you can consolidate their experiences into individual monologues, I think is a really nice approach, actually. And of course, what is nice about it is that what happens in the podcast is obviously very different from what happens on stage. I am choosing to set them in certain scenarios. So there's a bar, there's a supermarket, the church, but the monologues themselves could be done pretty much anywhere.
I hope so. And I'd love it to be something that women can run with in their communities, like maybe women who run red tents, or, you know, and it can maybe be the start at a bigger, longer term level of bringing back in those rites of passage and the understanding of those rites of passage, whether that is puberty and getting your first period, or whether it is getting married or becoming a mother, or all those things that were really a flow of what life is, that we've lost the ways of marking and celebrating somehow.
Helena Jevons, thank you for talking to Hot Flash's Menopause Monologues.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yesterday, I poured the tea straight into the sugar bowl. Looked like I was making cement in my own kitchen. No as bad as the previous day, mind. I'd been running about to get my grandkids to school, and I grabbed the wee one's water bottle. It's a lovely sort of gooseberry green, it is, that bottle, right? So I got them to school just in time, shoved the water bottle into his teacher's hand and wondered why she's giving me this funny look, and she tries to give me the bottle back. I'm like, no, that's for the bairn. Well, it was only then I realised it was his ma's bottle of gooseberry gin that must have been out on the counter. Can you imagine sending a 6-year-old to school with a bottle of gin?